Hi, Joel Went here. More about polls. I want to actually add to the discussion of polls the problem of push polls and also the problem of focus groups. These are sort of all interrelated to each other. It's important for people to understand what goes on in our political life, the kind of impulses that live there. I mean, a lot of people have certain ideas of this, but let's connect some dots, as it were. Um, Last time I talked about polls, and I tried to suggest that if one asked some different questions at the same time they asked certain other questions, we'd get a much different perspective on what people actually think. So, for example, I said, if you wanted to ask people whether they wanted to vote for Joe Blow or Jane Doe in an election, you should also ask them whether they really thought those people were qualified, are the best qualified people, and you should also ask them if they were replacing another politician, whether they met the standards or they had the same confidence in these new candidates as they did before. With these kinds of questions, you actually get a deeper insight into the nature of the thinking of the individual that's being polled. Of course, it's a disadvantage both for news organizations and for certain politicians, most politicians, to step outside what might be called the racehorse paradigm, which is to treat a political campaign as a horse race between two candidates. The fact is, in terms of the nature of the republic, which my next blog I'm basically going to say has been finally destroyed by the Supreme Court, but the basic idea of the republic was not to create this situation where you had a racehorse or a horse race or whatever. And this is one of the reasons for the existence at one time of the Electoral College. The founders had put the Electoral College in because they wanted particularly the highest offices elected on the basis of character judgments by peers, people that knew the possible people for president needed to have some particular direct knowledge of them. And what we've done today, of course, is we've inserted this system of lying in between an actual examination of the character of the individual via the press and via advertising and all these influences. Of course, the press likes to act like it goes into the depth of the character of various candidates because it finds sort of very human, ordinary flaws, as if the fact that John Edwards has an affair is an indication of his real character in the sense of what we need as a politician. Anyway, polls could be a lot better. They aren't likely to be, but in order to understand sort of the fact of why we don't get good government anymore, we need to understand that there's no longer an examination of the real character of individuals. Now, another kind of poll that people maybe should be apprised of, as they don't know it, is called a push poll. Now, a push poll isn't actually a poll, but you will get a telephone call from a group that says it's taking a poll, and it will ask you some questions, and you'll respond. But the idea is to insert information into that dialogue between you and the so-called pollster. That's the push part. They want to push an idea into the consciousness of the people they're calling up, as if they were taking a poll, but they put something in the poll questions that's not really necessarily the truth or a relatively important fact in terms of the campaign, but they push that idea onto the voter through the push poll, and generally it's a negative idea. Like they might call up and say, well, in the coming up election between John Doe and Jane Blow, would it influence your vote if you knew that Jane Blow had an abortion? Hello? See what happened there? When they frame the question that way, and this of course happens in regular polls as well, when they frame the questions this way, they are basically endeavoring to influence you through grabbing hold of some emotional element in your background and getting you to believe that so-and-so, that Jane Blow, did have an abortion, and of course maybe she didn't have an abortion, because if you look at how carefully the question was phrased, if you knew if she had an abortion, would this influence you? And they can say, well, we weren't really suggesting she had an abortion, we were just asking them ifs. That's a push-pull. The other thing is focus groups, and focus groups, of course, are a little bit more elaborate. They're basically a creature of the advertising industry, which took over political campaigns starting in the 1950s, and the whole situation degenerated since then because we've ended up being sold candidates like so much soap, instead of actually having an examination of their qualities as a human being, their character, and whether or not they're really qualified to have these offices. A lot of people get into office and then we get these corruption things, they have divorces or they run off to South America to have an affair, and we go, well, how did that happen? Well, that happened because we didn't really get an insight into their character. And we elect them because they were sold to us. Now, in a focus group, what happens? Well, a bunch of people are maybe approached at a mall, and they say, well, we're going to pay you $50 for an hour of your time. And they go, oh, cool, I got the time. And then they go into this room, and in this room there will be some mirror-like windows, like when you see interrogations go on in criminal cases. And the reason is because behind those windows there's cameras and recording instruments, because the people that are going to engage in this focus group are going to try to know every detail about how you react to their ideas. Now, what kind of ideas do they put out? Well, it's kind of interesting, the ideas that they put out. Taking my time here to see. Basically, what they're looking for is emotional reactions to language, because they're going to build this language form into the advertising that they deliver for a particular candidate. So they ask questions in these focus groups. Well, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And they don't just ask you questions like in polls, because the fact that they're recording you and taking pictures of you allows them to use their psychological sciences through investigating your tone of voice and the various gestures you make with your face and your eyes. If you watch the television show Lie to Me, you'll get some sense of the science that's out there. They will know, for example, whether a particular person says a certain thing and they're actually lying and they mean the opposite. And that's what they get by with these cameras and these other things. So basically, a focus group is a process by which the psychology of the voter is examined, and languages are developed, certain ways of saying things that get repeated over and over again in the advertising and the campaign, because that's advantageous to the campaigner. Now, what's really happening here? Well, what's really happening here is that false pictures are created of the nature of candidates that are really designed to be based on hooks into our emotional life. They want to skip past our cognitive life. They don't want us to think about things. They don't want us to contemplate or reflect. They want us to be emotional. And so they look for those words which will come to us out of this emotional stuff, like peace and hope and whatever. Thanks for listening. The next blog will likely blow your mind if you don't already know about it.